Mark Thompson adjusted his bow tie for what felt like the 100th time, glancing at his reflection in the gilded mirror that adorned the lavish hallway of the community center. The charity gala was in full swing, and the air buzzed with the chatter of well-dressed attendees, their laughter echoing against the ornate walls. Mark's wife, Sarah, stood beside him, her radiant smile lighting up the room. She wore a stunning emerald gown that hugged her figure perfectly, her hair cascading in soft waves around her shoulders. To the outside world, they were the epitome of a perfect couple. "Are you ready, darling?" Sarah asked, her voice sweet and inviting, laced with enthusiasm. "Of course," Mark replied, but the words felt hollow in his throat. He forced a smile, though his mind drifted to the constraints of their life together, the weight of expectations pressing down on him. As they entered the main hall, the sight of glittering chandeliers and the sound of clinking glasses momentarily distracted him. "Look, there's Mr. and Mrs. Henderson," Sarah exclaimed, tugging him toward their friends. Mark followed, a sense of dread pooling in his stomach. He greeted the couple with practiced politeness, engaging in small talk while his heart raced with the knowledge of the secret he harbored, a secret that felt more like a burden than a thrill. As the evening progressed, Mark found himself lost in the crowd, his laughter mingling with the symphony of voices around him. Yet, the joy felt superficial. He excused himself, stepping out onto the balcony where the cool night air brushed against his skin. The stars twinkled overhead, but all he could see was a growing chasm between him and the life he had built. "Mark, there you are. I was looking for you." Sarah's voice interrupted his thoughts. She appeared at the door, her expression a mix of concern and affection. "I just needed a moment," he admitted, forcing a chuckle. "The crowd can be overwhelming." She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around him. "I get it. Just remember, we're in this together. You're not alone." Mark felt a pang of guilt as he held her. How could he confess the truth that gnawed at his conscience? He was a man torn between duty and desire, between the life he had chosen and the one he craved. After the gala, Mark's routine shifted as he sought solace in the gym, where he met Tyler Williams, a personal trainer whose charisma and confidence drew Mark in like a moth to a flame. Tyler was everything Mark felt he was not: young, vibrant, and free. Their training sessions soon became the highlight of Mark's week, each workout igniting a spark that left him exhilarated and terrified in equal measure. "Come on, Mark. Push through. You've got this," Tyler encouraged one evening, his voice a blend of motivation and playful challenge. Mark grunted, sweat trickling down his brow, but the way Tyler's blue eyes sparkled with enthusiasm made his heart race. "Easier said than done," Mark replied, gasping for breath. "You make it look easy. Just wait until you see the results. You'll feel like a new man," Tyler said with a grin, his smile infectious. Mark felt a rush of admiration, but also a flutter of something deeper, an unspoken connection that hung thick in the air between them. He brushed it off, telling himself it was just a harmless crush. But as days turned into weeks, that thought became increasingly harder to ignore. One fateful night, after an intense workout, the atmosphere shifted. Mark leaned against the wall, panting, while Tyler wiped his forehead with a towel. They stood in close proximity, the air charged with unacknowledged tension. "Do you ever feel like you're living a lie?" Mark blurted, surprising even himself. Tyler paused, his gaze piercing. "Sometimes. But isn't that what makes life exciting? Breaking free from the mundane." Mark swallowed hard, his heart pounding as he contemplated the weight of those words. "I think I might need some of that excitement," he admitted, the vulnerability in his voice palpable. Tyler stepped closer, their breaths mingling in the dim light of the gym. "There's nothing wrong with wanting more, Mark." In that moment, the world around them faded away. Mark felt a magnetic pull, an undeniable urge that led him to close the distance. Their lips met in a heated kiss, igniting a fire within Mark that he had long suppressed. It was a moment fueled by longing and desperation, leading to a torrent of emotions that both thrilled and terrified him. As they broke apart, Reality crashed down on Mark like a tidal wave. He was exhilarated, yet the weight of impending consequences loomed over him. What had he done? What would it mean for his life, his marriage, and the careful facade he had built? The thrill of the kiss lingered on his lips, but the fear of betrayal gnawed at his heart, leaving him breathless with uncertainty as he stepped back into the shadows of his life, forever changed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over Mark Thompson's suburban neighborhood, he found himself seated on the edge of his bed, staring blankly at the wall. The weight of his double life pressed heavily on his shoulders. Mark had become a master of deception, juggling the demands of his seemingly perfect marriage to Sarah while secretly nurturing an intense, clandestine relationship with Tyler Williams. The thrill of their affair both exhilarated and terrified him, a constant reminder that he was living on borrowed time. In the kitchen, Sarah hummed softly to herself as she prepared dinner, her cheerful voice a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing inside Mark. He could hear her clattering pots and pans, the aroma of garlic and rosemary wafting through the air, but he felt detached, as if he were watching from a distance. She entered their bedroom to retrieve a sweater, her brow furrowed in concern. "Mark, are you okay? You've been so distant lately," Sarah said, her voice laced with genuine worry. Mark forced a smile, trying to mask the turmoil within. "I'm fine. Just a bit tired from work," he replied, hoping to deflect her probing gaze. But Sarah wasn't convinced. "You know you can talk to me, right?" "I just miss you," she said softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Of course," Mark said, his heart sinking. He wanted to reach out, to assure her that everything was all right, but the truth clawed at his throat, refusing to be voiced. Instead, he nodded, watching her leave the room, a knot tightening in his stomach. Later that night, in the shadows of a dimly lit hotel room, Mark and Tyler met for one of their secret rendezvous. The air was electric with anticipation as Tyler leaned against the wall, his muscular frame silhouetted in the soft glow of a bedside lamp. Mark's pulse quickened at the sight of him, the thrill of being with Tyler momentarily drowning out the guilt that gnawed at him. "Are you still thinking about her?" Tyler asked, his voice low and teasing, a smirk playing on his lips. Mark hesitated, the question hanging between them like a thick fog. Come on, Mark. You know this is what you want," Tyler interrupted, stepping closer, his presence intoxicating. "Let go of the past. Embrace who you are, with me." Mark's heart raced as Tyler reached out, his fingertips brushing against Mark's arm. The warmth spread through him, igniting a desire that felt both liberating and terrifying. "I don't know if I can," Mark confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I love Sarah. I don't want to hurt her." Tyler's expression shifted, a flicker of disappointment crossing his face. "But you're already hurting her by pretending to be someone you're not. You deserve to be happy, Mark. We deserve to be together." Mark's mind raced. The weight of his choices bore down on him, and he felt the walls closing in. He wanted to give in to the passion that enveloped him, but guilt wrapped its icy fingers around his heart. "I need time," he finally said, stepping back, creating distance between them. Tyler's eyes darkened, frustration evident in his stance. "Time? How much more time do you need? You're wasting it, Mark. We could have something incredible. Don't throw that away." Mark turned away, his heart heavy with the conflict raging inside him. "I can't just walk away from my life. I can't walk away from Sarah." The tension in the room thickened, and Tyler's demeanor shifted. "You think this will last? You're living a lie. Sooner or later, it will all come crashing down around you." As Mark met Tyler's gaze, he felt the truth of those words sink in. The affair was a ticking time bomb, and he was running out of time. He needed to make a choice, but the thought of losing Tyler sent a shiver down his spine. Back at home, Sarah was waiting for him, her eyes filled with concern and love. She wrapped her arms around him as he walked through the door, and for a moment, Mark felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps he could still salvage what they had. But deep down, The shadows of doubt lingered, whispering that he was teetering on the edge of a precipice, ready to fall into the abyss of his own making. Moments later, as Mark sat in silence, his phone buzzed on the table, breaking the stillness. A message from Tyler flashed on the screen, and a cold sweat broke out across his brow. "I need to talk. Tonight." Mark's heart raced. The stakes were rising, and he could feel the ground shifting beneath him. How much longer could he keep lying? Mark stood alone in his dimly lit office, the weight of his decisions pressing down on him like a thick fog. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, measuring the seconds of his turmoil. He could still feel the heat of Tyler's body against his, the thrill of their stolen moments, but now it all felt tainted. He had realized that he could no longer live with the deceit, not just for Sarah, but for himself. As the guilt gnawed at him, he decided to break things off with Tyler once and for all. "Tyler, we need to talk," Mark said, his voice steady yet tinged with uncertainty, when they met at the local cafe. Tyler leaned back in his chair, a frown creasing his forehead. "What's this about?" Tyler's dark eyes narrowed, suspicion creeping into his demeanor. Mark took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation. "I can't do this anymore. We need to end it," he declared, his heart racing. Tyler's expression changed from confusion to anger in a split second. "You think you can just walk away like that? After everything?" He leaned forward, the tension palpable. "You're mine, Mark. I won't let you go that easily." "Tyler, please," Mark implored, his hands trembling as he looked around the cafe, ensuring no one was eavesdropping. "This has to end. It's not fair to Sarah, and it's not fair to us. We're playing with fire here, and I don't want to get burned." "Burned? Is that what you're afraid of? Because I'm not going to let you throw away what we have. You think you can just go back to your perfect little life with her." Tyler's voice dropped to a whisper, filled with menace. "You don't know what I'm capable of." Mark's stomach twisted. "You don't mean that," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "You're threatening me now?" Tyler leaned back, crossing his arms defiantly. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep you, Mark. You think it's easy for me? I thought we had something special." "We did, but it's over," Mark shouted, the weight of his emotions spilling over. "You need to respect my decision." As they locked eyes, Mark saw a flicker of desperation in Tyler's gaze, quickly replaced by a dark resolve. "You really think you can just walk away without consequences?" "I'll expose us, Mark. I'll make sure everyone knows the truth." Mark felt the blood drain from his face. "You wouldn't dare," he started, but Tyler cut him off. "Try me," Tyler hissed, his voice low and menacing. "You're not as free as you think you are." Days passed, and the atmosphere at home grew increasingly tense. Mark's heart raced every time his phone buzzed, fearing it was Tyler. He felt trapped in a web of his own making. Meanwhile, Sarah became increasingly suspicious of his behavior. One evening, after another late night at work, she confronted him. "Mark, you've been acting so strange lately," Sarah said, her brow furrowing with concern. "Is there something you're not telling me?" "No, of course not," he replied too quickly, the lie tasting bitter on his tongue. "I'm just stressed with work." "Stressed? Or guilty?" she pressed, her eyes narrowing. "I can feel it. Something's off, and I need you to be honest with me." Mark's mind raced. He could feel the walls closing in around him. "It's just a lot to handle, Sarah. I promise. I'm not hiding anything," he insisted, trying to placate her. Sarah sighed deeply, the worry etched on her face. "I just want you to be happy. If something is bothering you, you can talk to me. I'm here for you." As the days turned into nights, Mark felt the weight of his choices suffocating him. He knew he had to meet Tyler one last time to end the charade. The thought of facing Tyler again sent shivers down his spine, but he was determined to reclaim his life. "Let's meet tonight," Mark texted Tyler, his fingers trembling as he hit send. The reply came almost instantly. "What time?" 8 p.m. The park. Mark typed back, his heart racing at the thought of the impending confrontation. When the time came, Mark found himself standing at the edge of the park, the moonlight casting eerie shadows among the trees. He could hear the distant rustle of leaves, the chirping of crickets, and the rapid beating of his heart. As he waited, doubts crept in. Was this really the right decision? Moments later, Tyler emerged from the shadows, a dark figure against the backdrop of the night. "You came," he said, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Tyler, we can't keep doing this," Mark said, his voice steady, masking the storm of emotions inside him. "It has to end tonight." "End?" Tyler laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "You really think you can just walk away? You've made your choice, and I'm not letting you go without a fight." With that, the tension in the air snapped, and what began as a conversation escalated into a physical confrontation, raw emotions pouring out in a chaotic clash of wills. The park, once a place of solace, became a battleground where love, betrayal, and desperation collided. The night air was thick with an unsettling silence as Mark staggered away from the park, his heart pounding in his chest. The confrontation with Tyler had spiraled out of control, leaving him breathless and shaken. He recalled the way Tyler's eyes had flashed with anger, the words exchanged like daggers between them. "You will regret this, Mark. You think you can just walk away." Tyler had warned, his voice low and threatening. Mark had felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with dread, the weight of his choices pressing down on him like a heavy fog. He had only wanted to end things, to reclaim the life he had built with Sarah. But now, as he walked through the dimly lit streets, a gnawing feeling of foreboding settled deep within him. He couldn't shake the image of Tyler's furious face, nor the sense of finality that had hung in the air. The next morning, the news hit the town like a thunderclap. Mark was sipping his coffee when the local radio station broke the devastating update. Tyler Williams had been found dead in the park. The words echoed in his mind, a sickening realization washing over him. He hadn't just lost a lover. He had lost a part of himself, and the guilt was suffocating. "Mark, did you hear about Tyler?" Sarah called from the living room, her voice laced with concern. Mark's heart sank as he set his mug down, his hands trembling. "Yeah, I heard," he managed to reply, forcing a calmness into his tone that felt like a mask. "It's so awful. I can't believe it. They say he was murdered," Sarah said, her voice trembling, her eyes wide with shock. She had always been empathetic, caring, and in moments like this, it was both a comfort and a torment to Mark. He had betrayed her trust, and now, with her innocence still intact, he was carrying the burden of a secret that could destroy everything. I don't know what to say," he stammered, his mind racing. How could he explain his connection to Tyler without implicating himself? Sarah approached him, concern etched on her face. "You look pale. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired, I guess." But as the day wore on, the news spread like wildfire through their small town. The local police began their investigation, interviewing anyone who had crossed paths with Tyler in his final hours. Mark's heart raced each time he thought of the detectives knocking on doors, piecing together the last moments of Tyler's life. As the sun set, casting long shadows across their living room, Mark's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. His stomach dropped as he hesitated to open it. When he finally did, his palms grew clammy. It was a series of messages from Tyler, sent in the days leading up to that fateful confrontation. "You can't just leave me, Mark. I won't let you. Think about everything we've shared. You can't throw it all away. Don't make me expose you." Each message was more threatening than the last, and Mark's heart sank further into despair. He had been so wrapped up in the thrill and secrecy of their affair that he hadn't realized how possessive Tyler had become. Later that night, as Mark lay awake, the weight of Tyler's death pressed heavily on his chest. He turned to Sarah, who was fast asleep beside him, unaware of the storm brewing within him. He wanted to reach out, to tell her everything, but the fear of losing her was paralyzing. Instead, he stared into the darkness, consumed by the shadows of his past decisions. The following day, investigators arrived at their home, knocking firmly on the door. Mark's heart raced as he opened it, his mind racing with thoughts of what they might ask. The detectives introduced themselves, their expressions serious and unyielding. "Mr. Thompson, we need to ask you a few questions regarding Tyler Williams," one of them said, his tone leaving no room for denial. Mark's throat felt dry as he nodded, trying to maintain his composure. "Of course. What do you need to know?" As the questions began, Mark felt the walls closing in around him. Each inquiry felt like a thread unraveling, pulling him deeper into a web he could not escape. They probed into his relationship with Tyler, asking about their last meeting, about arguments, about threats. Mark's heart raced with every question, his mind frantically searching for the right words to deflect their suspicions. "Did you have any disagreements with Mr. Williams?" the detective asked, piercing blue eyes fixed on Mark's face. Mark hesitated, remembering the heat of their confrontation. "We had a disagreement, but it was nothing serious, just a misunderstanding." The detectives exchanged glances, skepticism etched on their faces. "You seem nervous, Mr. Thompson. Is there something you're not telling us?" "I'm hooked. This is all so sudden," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. As they continued to question him, Mark felt the foundations of his life begin to crack. He was a man standing at the edge of an abyss, and with each passing moment, he realized that the truth he had buried was clawing its way to the surface, threatening to expose the fragile facade of his existence. Mark sat on the edge of his bed, his hands trembling as he stared at the wall, lost in thought. The weight of the investigation crushed him like a heavy blanket, suffocating any remnants of hope he had left. In the dim light of the early evening, shadows danced across the room, echoing the turmoil within him. Just days ago, he had been a man of confidence, successful in his career, loved by his wife, and consumed by an exhilarating affair. Now, he was a suspect, a man on the brink of losing everything. His phone buzzed across the nightstand, pulling him from the depths of despair. It was Leo, his oldest friend, and a flicker of relief washed over him. Mark picked up the phone, hesitating for a moment before answering. "Mark," Leo's voice came through, steady but tinged with concern. "We need to talk." "I don't know, Leo. I'm not sure I can face anyone right now," Mark replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Listen to me," Leo insisted, his tone firm. "You can't keep hiding. You need to come clean to Sarah. She deserves to know the truth before it's too late." Mark swallowed hard, his throat dry. The thought of confessing his betrayal to Sarah felt like a dagger twisting deeper into his chest. But what if she can't forgive me? What if I lose her for good? "Mark, you might lose her anyway if you don't come clean. She's already suspicious, and the investigator has dug up enough dirt. You owe her this." A heavy silence hung between them, punctuated only by Mark's agitated breathing. He could feel the walls closing in, the world outside continuing on, blissfully unaware of the chaos swirling around him. "Fine," he finally said, his voice thick with resignation. "I'll talk to her." "Good. I'll be there for you. Just remember, honesty is the only way out of this mess," Leo said before hanging up. Mark put the phone down, dread pooling in his stomach. He knew the moment of truth was approaching, and with it, the potential for devastation. He glanced at the clock. Time was slipping away. With a deep breath, he steeled himself for the confrontation that awaited him. Later that evening, Sarah entered their home, her demeanor tense. She had been distant, and the worry etched on her face was unmistakable. Mark's heart raced as she approached him, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Mark, we need to talk," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "I've been doing some digging, and I found out about your meetings with Tyler." Mark's heart dropped. "Sarah, just don't," she interrupted, her eyes ablaze with hurt. "I have evidence, Mark. I spoke to the investigator, and he told me everything." His breath caught in his throat. "Please, just let me explain." "Explain what?" "How you betrayed me. How you lied to my face day after day." Sarah's voice cracked, and Mark felt the sting of her words like a physical blow. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It spiraled out of control." He ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of his guilt suffocating him. "I never wanted to hurt you, Sarah. I promise." Tears welled in her eyes, and she took a step back, as if he was a stranger. "But you did hurt me. You were supposed to be my partner, my confidant. How could you do this?" Mark's voice trembled as he spoke. "I was lost, Sarah. I didn't know how to handle my feelings. I thought I could keep it separate, but I can't deny it anymore. I loved Tyler, but I never wanted this to end in tragedy." "Loved? You still love him?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "How can I trust you now?" "I don't know," he admitted, feeling the weight of his confession crash down on him. "But I swear I had nothing to do with his death. I didn't kill him, Sarah. I was just as shocked as you are when I found out." At that moment, the doorbell rang, breaking the tension. Mark's heart raced, and he exchanged a worried glance with Sarah. As he approached the door, anxiety clawed at him. When he opened it, two detectives stood on the other side, their expressions grave. "Mark Thompson, we need to speak with you," one of the detectives said, his voice firm. Mark's stomach dropped, and he turned back towards Sarah, who looked as if the ground had just given way beneath her. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Mark, you're under arrest for the murder of Tyler Williams," the detective stated, producing handcuffs. "No, I didn't do anything," Mark protested, panic flooding his voice. As the cold metal clamped around his wrists, he caught a glimpse of Sarah's horrified expression. Betrayal mingled with confusion. The shadows seemed to close in around him, and he felt himself being pulled into darkness. In that moment, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching from the darkness, an unseen figure lurking in the background, waiting for the right moment to strike. As the trial began, the atmosphere in the packed courtroom was thick with tension. Mark Thompson sat at the defendant's table, his heart racing as he listened to the prosecution lay out their case against him. The lead prosecutor, a sharp woman with piercing blue eyes, painted a damning picture of Mark as a scorned lover driven to commit murder. She spoke with confidence, her voice echoing in the hushed room. Mark Thompson had everything to gain from Tyler Williams' death, she asserted, gesturing towards Mark with an accusatory finger. A failing marriage, a secret affair, and a man who threatened to expose him. It's clear he had the motive. Mark felt the weight of her words pressing down on him, stifling his breath. He glanced at Sarah, who sat in the front row, her face a mask of anguish. The betrayal hung in the air like a heavy fog, suffocating their once happy life. He wanted to reach out to her, to tell her that he wasn't the monster they painted him to be, but the reality of their situation had become a prison. Just as the prosecutor finished her opening statements, a commotion stirred in the back of the courtroom. A tall figure stepped forward, drawing the attention of the jury and spectators alike. It was Ryan Williams, Tyler's estranged brother, a man Mark had never met but had heard whispers about in the wake of Tyler's death. Ryan's presence sent a ripple of intrigue through the room. "I have information that changes everything," Ryan declared, his voice steady yet laden with emotion. The judge looked skeptical but nodded for Ryan to take the stand. As he approached, Mark couldn't help but notice the somber expression etched on Ryan's face. This was a man carrying the weight of loss and betrayal, much like himself. Ryan recounted his strained relationship with Tyler, detailing how they had drifted apart due to Tyler's increasingly reckless lifestyle. Tyler got involved with some dangerous people, he confessed, his gaze flickering with a hint of anger. He wasn't just a personal trainer. He was mixed up in drugs. I warned him, but he wouldn't listen. The courtroom fell silent, the audience hanging on his every word. "I found this message on his phone after he died," Ryan continued, producing a printed copy of a threatening text. "It's from a dealer named Marcus. Tyler owed him money. This wasn't just a random killing. It was personal." Gasps erupted from the observers, and Mark's heart surged with hope. Could Ryan's testimony really exonerate him? Ryan's voice grew stronger as he recounted how Tyler had been acting paranoid in the days leading up to his death. He told me he was scared, that someone was watching him. I thought it was just the drugs messing with his mind, but now I realize he was right. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly taken aback by this unexpected turn of events. Ryan's words painted a different narrative, one that shifted the focus away from Mark and placed it squarely on the shadows of Tyler's life. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit this evidence," Ryan said, handing over the message to the court clerk. The judge examined it, then nodded for it to be entered into the record. As the courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations, Mark felt a glimmer of relief. Perhaps there was a way out of this hellish nightmare. But as Ryan continued to speak, detailing the web of deception surrounding Tyler, his dealings, the threats, the enemies he had made, Mark felt the weight of a different burden. The truth was finally surfacing, but it came with a cost. Mark's affair with Tyler had opened the floodgates to a world of darkness neither of them had seen fully. The tangled desires that had driven him into Tyler's arms now seemed trivial compared to the dangerous reality Ryan described. As the trial continued, it became clear that the demons of Tyler's life were numerous, implicating not just Mark but several other individuals entwined in Tyler's troubled existence. Each revelation pulled the threads of Mark's past tighter, exposing not only the tragic consequences of his actions, but also a community riddled with betrayal, deceit, and hidden dangers. When Ryan's testimony concluded, the courtroom erupted into chaos. Mark felt the tension in the air shift, the burden of guilt lifting slightly as he realized that he might finally be free. But freedom came with haunting echoes of his choices, the shadows of his past decisions lingering in the corners of his mind. As the gavel banged, signaling a recess, Mark looked at Sarah, hoping to see a glimmer of understanding. He was free, but at what price?